Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Drone Responders webinar. My name is Christopher Todd. I'm the Executive Director of AIRT, and we have a really exciting presentation for you today. We're really glad you've taken part of your day out to join us. We're going to introduce our guest panel here in just a second, but I just want to set a couple ground rules. We are going to have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A part at the bottom of the screen. Also, there is a chat feature. If you want to chat with the panelists or other members, feel free to enter your comments there, and we will definitely get them over to you. So let's go back into the actual webinar portion, and let me introduce our guests for you here today. We have Romeo Dersher, the Senior Director of Public Safety Integration at DJI, is here today with us. Welcome, Romeo. We have Chief Wayne Baker, Director of Public Safety Integration for DJI, also with us. And of course, from Charlottesville, Virginia, our very own Director of Drone Responders, Chief Charles Werner. Chief, I'm going to go up to you in Charlottesville. Tell us how's everything going up there?
Everything's going great. We have had a few protests. Again, this was the third anniversary yesterday of August 12th, 2017. When we had the first Civil War protest, statute protest. So we're working through that, and we're continuing to work on our diversity and other issues to improve our situation. But otherwise, everything's great.
All right. Well, let's tee up this conversation today, because we're really going to be talking about the growth of public safety UAS programs and why it's important for information to be collected and disseminated to help people understand all the different successes that are taking place. As well as, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about DJI and some things that public safety operators need to know about a program they have called the QEP, or Qualified Entities Program. But first, I wanted to take a look at some data from our recent survey and get your thoughts on it. Sound good to you?
Sounds good.
Okay. So just kind of rehashing, this was fall 2019, the Drone Responders Public Safety UAS survey data, and we asked how long your public safety UAS program had been operational. We saw a really nice spread from different agencies that were just getting started, some that were less than a year. The sweet point was 1 to 2 years. And then we saw a few agencies then that were tenured, 2 to 3 years of experience or more than 3 years experience. As we asked this same question again back in late May, early June, we saw that the amount of operational experience out there seems to be increasing. We still have agencies that are getting their program up and running, less than 1 year of experience, or they're in the exploratory phase. We've got a decent amount at the 1 year point, but we're seeing at the 2 year or 3 or more years that there's a lot more programs seem to have experience under their belt. So can you talk a little bit about what you think that means from your perspective?
Well, the exciting thing is that we're seeing new departments coming in, but we're also seeing those that have been here a while. We're seeing the maturity of the programs. And what we're going to see here shortly is a little bit of how vastly the use of drones have changed in public safety than where we were before. The other thing that we're going to see is there's an increase in the missions sets, as you can see here. If you remember in the beginning, we had 3 areas that were probably most common: damage assessment, traffic crash reconstruction, and search and rescue. They were probably the 3 primary ways that people got into using drones. Now we see over 17 different use cases. So with that, we've also seen, because programs are more mature, they're doing more missions, it's also requiring them to get more remote pilots.
Gotcha. And of course, when you think about small UAS operations in public safety, there's one brand that is the clear leader in the space, and that is DJI, with about 90% market share. The Qualified Entities Program is a really interesting program that we're going to learn about today in the second part of this webinar, also known as the QEP. And if you're a public safety agency out there, you might be familiar with the airspace you typically operate in, at least you should be, but airspace can change. And also, if you go on a mutual assistance call to another jurisdiction, you may need the ability to fly in places that might not be available to the hobbyist or commercial operators who are not part of the QEP. So, Chief, can you talk a little bit about just the need to be able to unlock airspace and how important that is for public safety operations?
Well, I think the QEP program that they're going to explain about is really important because we need to have the freedom to be able to fly whenever we need to fly. And we don't want to find out at the time we have a mission, wherever we might be, that we're blocked. I want to add to go back to the slide for a second. Before I do that, I just want to say, I want to just hit on the fact that DJI is the leader in the market. And I want to thank Romeo, because Romeo has been out there for, for years now, really working closely with public safety to learn and to share and help us expand that going forward. So that, and then Wayne, of course, what you did in your department and taking off and stepping into the program with DJI, we appreciate all the work that you're doing as well. Go ahead.
And the last data point is just, and I think this is a good segue to hand it off over to Romeo, but just, you know, from our research, we've seen that there is a real appetite for agencies around the world to understand how one another are using drones for good. We saw 97% of the survey respondents say the ability to track and understand how different public safety organizations are using drones for good is essential. So, I mean, we've been working on that a little bit here at Drone Responders, and concurrently DJI has been doing some pretty exciting things. And with that being said, I'm going to bring in Romeo here and turn it over to you, Romeo, and welcome to the program.
Christopher, thank you so much. Chief Warner, thank you for having us here on this podcast. It's very exciting. I'm very happy that I also have Chief Baker with me for backup. That definitely helps this presentation to give it like a little bit more extra punch. So without further ado, let's get started here. How did we get here? And I wanted to take this as a little opportunity to go a little bit back in time and showcase how did all of this start? What was the vision? And I joined DJI almost 6 years ago, which in the drone industry is quite a long time. So much has transpired in those last 6 years. But what happened, it was in 2015. That was the time of the DJI Phantom 2 Vision Plus. There was this idea that we should go to fire stations and we should showcase this drone and see if we can get a fire station in California to be interested in testing this technology and working with us. And as you can imagine, you know, this is like the 1950s, you know, vacuum salesperson going from door to door. Now do that in public safety. There was already the first lesson that we learned. You don't do sales in public safety. You don't go knocking on the chief's door and trying to sell something. But what we really figured out was it's much more difficult to get these technology items into the public safety realm. And just one fun anecdote from that time, in 2015, in early 2015, the thinking was that a fire station would only need one drone, and that would be it. Wow, were we off? But we didn't know any better. So then 2016, back at the time in 2015-16, we didn't have 107 here in the United States. The 333 exemption was the governing, in essence, way to fly drones commercially, and it was very, very cumbersome compared to the 107. But we wanted to start working with public safety entities, and because it was so difficult here in the US from a regulatory perspective, we created the partnership with ENA, the European Emergency Number Association. And I was super excited because ENA in Europe is really the organization that brings in the various EU membership countries together and bring new technologies and new ways and standards into the public safety world. We created 4 pilot test sites. One was Greater Copenhagen Fire Department with West Wales Fire Rescue, Donegal Mountain Search and Rescue in Ireland, and Reykjavik Search and Rescue in Iceland. And together for that pretty much entire summer and fall, we learned how these entities are integrating drones, their lessons learned, their recommendations and best practices, and we released that DJI ENA white paper the end of that year. And to this day, it's one of the leading white papers that are referenced back in regards to drones and integration into public safety. That very same year, we did another very interesting project, and that one was with Black Channel, and we did a high altitude search and rescue study with the goal to assess the value of drones to support standard mountain search and rescue techniques, but in extreme conditions. And we went up to the Adamello Glacier in the Trentino area in northern Italy. And the whole idea up there was to really understand, would a drone be an asset in high altitude search and rescue operation? And if so, how would it be used? And we were on top of this glacier, and obviously you have environmental challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. And one opportunity that we learned was by pre-mapping the crossing of a glacier, the teams of experienced mountaineers and search and rescue people, by looking at that 3D or 2D model, they chose a different path than they would have otherwise. And that was to us a very, very interesting learning that, that in essence, before you venture out, if you have the ability to map, that can provide you with a lot of interesting and helpful data. In 2018, again, with Ian at the European Emergency Number Association, we did the DJI drone efficacy study. And that was really to better understand how a drone-enabled search and rescue team compares to a non-drone enabled search and rescue team. And we did 50 trials in Wales and in Ireland. And we really compared both teams, comparing against each other, and observed how operators were utilizing drones. And what we did learn was that at the end of the day, out of those 50 trials, on average, the drone-assisted search and rescue team found the victim over 3 minutes earlier than the just boots on the ground team. But the real interesting piece was we started to see how teams were deploying drones, and they would deploy drones in a way that was kind of new. They would send the drone to the furthest point of the rescue area so that they didn't have to walk across the entire field, or they would send the drone to the more dangerous or difficult areas to get to mitigate the risk. And that was a really interesting learning. Ultimately, the standardization piece was that one component that really stood out as something that we as an industry and as a community need to better figure out. What this all led us to also realize was that we kind of have to show the public the impact of drones. And we created in 2017 the first live rescued by drones document. And if you have a smart device with a camera, you can now scan that QR code and it will get you to this particular report. But this was the first time we kind of tried to quantify, in essence, the impact of drones. And we took data from May 2013 to February 2017, and we came up with 59 lives that were rescued in 18 incidents. And at the time, a lot of these lives rescued were because a civilian was close by flying a drone for fun and just happened to be in the area to help an operation. 31 lives were rescued during floods. And we wanted to really make sure that we only highlight cases that were validated, meaning that there was a description, there was an article about it that you can click on and you can read up on it, and that the tool was the essential piece that helped with that rescue. So if the drone was just there and also flying, but had really nothing to do with the discovery of a lost person or with providing a stranded individual with a line, then we didn't include it. We did a second report the following year. This report covered, in essence, 12 months, 13 months, and it was from May 2017 to April 2018. And in that period, we already started to see a much larger impact of drones. So 65 lives were rescued and saved in 27 incidents. 22 of those, they were actually in great risk of death. So the drone really was the life-saving tool for those individuals. 19 were found in circumstances that were not immediately life-threatening, but they did present a risk to their health and safety. And for the first time, we started to see the use of thermal imaging cameras being an incredible helpful tool. 15 out of those 65s were located because we were able to utilize this technology, maybe at the darkness of night or in cold conditions and looking for any sort of heat signatures. And then today, in 2020, we made all of this available online in form of a website, a map that you can go and interact with. And I have an update to the total number of people saved. As of today, just a few minutes ago, we had 450 lives saved in 259 incidents in 28 countries. And that is really amazing, because the importance and the value and the benefit of these life rescued is tremendously. Not only is it an emotional benefit, not only to those 450 people, but to their families and friends. And the economical impact of every one of those lives is unspoken, because they are still a contributing member of society. And that is something that we all can really be proud of, this technology. So this is a fantastic tool. If you use this QR code, it gets you right to the website. You can play around, you can read up on these incidents. They're all linked back. And in fact, I think Chief Baker, I'm going to hand it over to you to look at some of these rescues that we have seen.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for letting me be here today. I really appreciate it. And I just real quick want to say that, you know, what my goal my whole career was saving lives and property. And now as drone technology, as we're talking about, came about to save lives and property, it was something I obviously embraced and really worked hard to learn about and implement in my department. And now, you know, at DJI, I'm getting the opportunity to continue that mission, my lifelong mission forward, as well as this. So to continue on with this map, is one of the great features of the map is you pick an area that you click into, you can go to the stories. So it's not just that we're tracking numbers, we're also showing you the stories that you can read about these incidents. And in this particular case from Chile, it was back in November of 2018, and there was a motorcycle accident down a steep hillside, and they were able to utilize a drone. They weren't able to get to them. They knew that it would take time to get to them. It was cold in the Patagonia region that they were at in. And so they were able to fly some thermal blankets down to these victims, and they were able to stay warm until the rescuers could get to them. Our next one takes us over to the United Kingdom. And this again was in 2018, and it was a man that was missing overnight. He had dementia, you know, and some of the areas that you can get out into and some of the more areas that you can get out into in the United Kingdom, you know, they're difficult to access. They were able to fly and find this gentleman and get him home safely. So another one of the good active rescues. And this one's from France, but if you'll notice to the right, there is another circle, and that just happens to be Romeo's hometown that showed up on the map. So I added that in there for his benefit. But this one was a 70-year-old skier that was found neck deep in an avalanche. Just tremendous technology there to be able to do that, and find him pretty rapidly. And this was just a few months ago, so we can see where this technology is advancing around the world to be able to be utilized. And then right down the road from me, literally, in 2018, I really have to give, I put this one on purpose, not just because it's Texas and, you know, we're the greatest nation in the world, but this was actually the emergency management coordinator for the county just south of me. And I go down to this area quite a bit with my family at camp. So it's near and dear to my heart, but it was a proud moment back in 2018 when he flew flotation devices out to two people that were stranded in the river and was able to make a good active water rescue, which is one of the things we started out being able to do was water rescues as well. So this was a tremendous save there. You know, our goal is we want to keep updating, keep this a living map, and so part of that is, you know, you can go into this link, you can follow the QR code there, and go in, and if you hear about stories or you have a story and information, you can add to it as well, so that we can start tracking these active rescues and really show to the decision makers why this technology is so important, why we need the funding for it, as well as help other agencies that are trying to get the decision makers to make that decision, help them move forward. But there's another part to this that several years ago I really started looking at, that's passive rescues. To me, again, I go back to safety, and obviously my career was revolving around, you know, saving the citizens' lives, but also firefighter and police officer lives. And that's really, for me, a big reason why I do it. When I became chief of Joshua, I took over a department that had one line of duty death it was a wildland fire. And prior to that, I had done a lot of teaching on firefighter safety and survival. And so it was a natural, you know, thing for me, again, to want to protect the firefighters and find ways to do that in this technology, of course. So the thing that I really looked at is that anytime I can send a robot, a machine, to do the job rather than a human, you know, I've probably prevented injury or you know, hopefully I've prevented even death, not just injury. So this is really important here. And I call that a passive rescue. I may not ever know that I just did that. You know, and it may not even be that I saw something, or it may be that I even saw something that would break that chain of events that leads to an incident occurring. So it just adds another layer of overwatch safety to an incident. So along that line of those passive rescues, Romeo was very fortunate to be involved in some interesting uses very early on. Unfortunately, you know, the outcomes were that they were body recoveries, but I mention it as a passive rescue because this is dangerous terrain that they operated in. One picture here on the bottom left, they're in Donegal and rough terrain searching. But then the other pictures, they're actually looking for an American, and forgive me, this was in, can you say it for me, Romeo?
Lauterbrunnen.
Thank you.
Oops,
I don't want to Texasize it, but they were looking for an American, you know, paraskier that had disappeared, and you can obviously see the terrain that they're trying to search. And in fact, in this picture, I didn't add it. We weren't able to, The camera crew is actually having to be roped in on a harness and rope system, just because of some of where they're operating at, and they're flying down into this crevasse area here to search in that area. Whereas to normally search, you're putting people on rope systems, and that's just, anytime you're doing that, you're adding to the dangers. The next is what we became famous for, and I mentioned earlier, is the water rescues. So as we look at, flooding areas, anytime I don't have to put a person in the water, I mean, I'm one of the first things they teach you in water rescue class is getting in the water is one of the last things you want to do. And so if I'm able to not put a crew in a boat in a flooding area and search instead with a drone, that's so much better. And then the same goes for, in this case, in the top right picture, this again near and dear to me, but it was very important. I was on another water rescue that we were actually using a drone on when our county emergency manager, Jamie Moore, was able to fly and look in a vehicle for one of our neighboring departments and determine no one was in that vehicle. So now, rather than put people in the boat to go into the water to try and look, they were able to transition into a search, downstream search on the shorelines. So again, to me, that's a passive rescue in that we didn't put firefighters in harm's way. Another one that I look at is obviously fires, but one of the things I realized early on is not to get into the ventilation debate of whether to do vertical ventilation, go on roofs. I'm not getting into that. But if a department does do that, as I did, I knew, especially in this top right picture on this fire, I knew I had an exterior fire extended to the attic, no involvement below the attic space. So I knew it was all in the attic. Sending a crew to the roof, I had the peace of mind of knowing the roof was intact and they knew right where to cut their ventilation hole. So there was no educated guesswork that we had in the past. They could go right to the spot, cut the hole, and get off the roof. Going forward from that is also I have the peace of mind if this was not one of those situations, if this was a normal interior attack, I have the peace of mind of knowing the roof is structurally intact before I commit crews to making entry into the building. So this is another very key piece. And then on automobile accidents, especially ones on highways, anytime we shut down a highway, we increase the danger every minute that the road is open for other traffic to accidents to occur. In fact, this department I'm actually flying for, sadly, many years ago, the city manager he's now city manager, he was assistant city manager, unfortunately lost his son due to traffic backups at a construction area when they were hit from behind. And that always stuck with me and is one of the reasons why I've always wanted to clear roadways as fast as I could. And so now, going back in this instance, they'd had a DUI accident and they wanted to go back and get pictures from their impact point. And so we came out with I had the Matrice 300 with the H20T and was able to come out and get these series of pictures for them without shutting the roadway down. And it was the traffic investigator was just absolutely thankful for it. And it's phenomenal technology that really helped them out. They didn't have to go back out and get out on the roadway and be in danger. And neither did the public have to be in danger. And then moving on from that is, and I think this is one of the greatest examples, an active shooter where we can reduce the time that they're able to shoot by being able to fly indoors. Bottom right picture shows an individual that this is after a vehicle pursuit. There was still an individual in the car, in the vehicle, not responding to commands. They didn't know the situation. They don't know if that person's armed, and that's at the most dangerous position for everybody, including the suspect in the vehicle. So they were able to fly over, look in, and notice that this person was just passed out in the vehicle, and approach it with a different perspective. But the one on the left, you can see in the blue circle, there's an officer, and in the red circle is a suspect that's actually in the process of hands up, I give up, I surrender. And this was Torrance PD in California, and this was one of the ones that really hit me on the passive rescue, because here is an individual that had burglarized a house, and now he's trying to escape, and he's hopping from backyard to backyard. And they're able to keep their eye on him with a Matrice 210 and a Z30. And finally, the officers are able to get him into a position where they can corner him, as it were. And in this case, he realized, hey, I'm caught, I give up. And the great thing to me was, and there was another instance in Mansfield that this occurred, where an individual surrendered immediately. But he did that because he was at his most vulnerable, where he was relaxed, where he was not armed, visibly seen not to be armed, and officers were able to come in and effect the arrest. Both of these situations, that suspect didn't make a decision that could have cost them their life by making an officer react with deadly force. And I think that's very important, is that not only was an officer's life saved, but a suspect's life was saved as well, by allowing time for officers to get into a better position. They're more relaxed. They're not in a heightened state, and that suspect is realizing that there's not many options. And to that point, I'll end with this one on my part of this. And this is great because this was just the other day. So it's very timely. And there's a QR link to the article. And this was in California. And it was an individual that had allegedly just stabbed his girlfriend. The officers were trying to find him in this area, and they had just started their UAS program. And this was the first flight for this department, again, just several days ago. And it was a great win. They were able to catch the guy, and as I understand, he even surrendered to the drone. They followed him back, or the drone followed him back to the officers. And again, he wasn't in a heightened state at that point. He knew there was no way out, so he was more compliant. And I think, and I hope I'm not messing up his name, but Lieutenant Flawhair says, and I copied this quote from the article. Please do read the article. It's great information. But this is just an outstanding point to all of this that I'm trying to make, that this lieutenant said way better than I have done today. And that is, with crimes like this, oftentimes suspects will react with direct aggression or violence towards officers. But because of the other set of eyes in the sky, the suspect reconsidered his plans and options. So it was a win-win for everybody. And I think that's what's great. So again, this is part of why my passion is here, not just the active lives we're able to save, but the passive. And then one quick more comment. We even see that in other verticals and other industries, especially the energy, where they're able to, instead of sending somebody up onto power lines or antenna towers, they can fly up and make inspections and not put anybody in risk, but they're also able to do it more efficiently, so we can prevent large wildland fires like what we saw in California over the last couple of years from down power lines. And again, all of this we'll never be able to quantify, but we know that we are making a difference beyond what we're tracking right now. So thank you guys again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Chief Baker. Absolutely. And you're so right. It's so difficult to quantify this passive rescue topic because it, again, has a huge impact. Not only, less injuries means that departments are more effective and efficient, but also it saves costs to the city and to the county or to the state. And it has a benefit on so many different levels that it's hard to quantify really how much of a value that passive rescue really is. I want to move into something a little bit different, and that is the GEO fencing. And I want to give our listeners a little bit of history. DJI, many years ago, around 2014, decided that we would geofence sensitive locations, meaning because the drone has a GPS chip inside, the drone knows where in 3D space it is, and we can tell the drone that if it's an airport, that you should not be flying here. Later on, we added prisons and nuclear power plants, temporary flight restrictions we added on it, so that our consumer customers, especially at the time, 2014, that they have an additional notification, additional tool to understand their airspace. Also, there are altitude restrictions. Obviously, we made it so that you could potentially verify to go a little bit higher, but then at 500 meters from takeoff location, that's your absolute drop dead point. Now, moving a couple of years ahead, 2015-16 timeframe, we started to realize, wait, especially with the public safety sector, we need a tool, we need a way that public safety can get unlocked and stay unlocked and can operate in those more sensitive environments, because they very likely are 107 certified, they potentially have a COA, and so we need to come up with a way that we can unlock those departments and also unlock the altitude restriction. For example, if we're in the Sierra Nevadas in the mountains and we have a rescue or a search and rescue operation, we're flying alongside the mountain, we're always 300 feet, 400 feet, or even lower above the ground. But because we're flying up on the mountain, at some point, we're gonna reach that altitude limitation we set. And so we wanted to remove that as well, so that you can now fly potentially up to the peak of the mountain and come back. So we created the QEP, the Qualified Entities Program. And that is right now for public safety entities specifically. With this QR code, it gets you to the form. It's a fairly simple process that will be simplified in the very near future with a web portal access. In essence, if you're a public safety entity under a COA or with 107, you review the terms and conditions, and you have an authorization letter from your department saying, please DJI unlock for our department these following aircrafts. We will do that, and there's a spreadsheet where you add the flight controller serial number, the DJI account numbers, and that's how you send all of it in, and we will unlock it in the system, and you will be able to fly across North America, even if you are part of a mutual aid out of your jurisdiction, or you go on a hurricane relief mission as part of USAR or whatever the case may be, you will be able to fly and not have to deal with the geofencing. So a very, very helpful feature. The question came up recently, why do we need an authorization letter from the department? And the reason is that in case there is not, we want to avoid a rogue operator, in essence, somebody who just, happens to be a, maybe fireman or police officer and has his own drone and wants to just have that unlocked. And we wanted to make it so that the department or the UAV lead, in essence, knows about it and gives his or her blessing that we want to unlock those aircrafts. And that we're accomplishing with the authorization letter. It's just this additional step to ensure that the department knows that this is being done. Now, another question is, where do we get the flight controller serial number? And if you don't get the right number, then the team cannot unlock your aircraft, and you will spend time going back and forth. So Chief Baker and I decided we're going to put a little bit more information in here. So the flight controller serial number is inside your app, and you have to turn on your drone, your radio controller, and your smart device, and then just like you were flying, but then you go into your menus. On the top right, there are 3 dots, and then you go down into another 3 dots in your menu, and under About, you will see the flight controller serial number information. And that's what needs to be communicated to DJI, because that's the specific identifier of that particular drone. And if that particular drone and the DJI account or accounts are activated, it's like a 2-key verification, then it gets unlocked. If somebody else logs in that is not authorized, that is not part on that list, it will not unlock. So it's kind of like a 2-key mechanism to ensure that the right person and the right platform are both logged in. If you have changes down the road, right now you just make those changes on the spreadsheet and send that back. In the future, you will be able to make those changes right in the portal yourself, and it will be processed pretty much right away. And so a extremely helpful tool, especially for public safety entities. And that brings us to the end.
All right. Well, thank you, Romeo. That was great information. And I'm going to jump into just a couple quick questions from the Q&A, because they're really focused on the QEP program. And I know, Romeo, you just talked about the portal that DJI is developing. One of the questions was, how can we get the QEP? Can you provide us the link for fire department and law enforcement? It's not easy to find on the DJI website. So if you just want to quickly cover again, just the process for them to enroll.
Absolutely. So step 1 is if you scan this QR code here, it will get you through a Dropbox, and that has all the forums. If you don't have a QR scanner, send us an email, romeo.durscher@dji.com or wayne.baker@dji.com, and we'll send you the forums. The forums are very simple. You sign the terms and conditions, and then on the spreadsheet, on the Excel spreadsheet, that's where you list all your aircrafts and all your DJI account login emails, and then you send that in to a specific address that is mentioned in there, and it will get unlocked usually within 24 hours, and your unlock stays active. However, every 6 months or so, the team will reach out to you and say, hey, can you please just confirm that your QEP is still active? Do you need to make changes? Don't ignore that email. If you don't respond, then we take it as you may not need the QEP program anymore. So communicate with us just so we know that, hey, we still have a good contact person with your department and you still want to utilize the QEP program. And if you respond, the QEP will continue on, and you don't really have to do anything except update new aircrafts that you're adding on to the fleet, or old ones that you're retiring, take them off so that the unlock gets taken off.
And I can attest firsthand that, you know, the QEP program works as advertised. When we first signed up and registered, it was a really seamless process. Took maybe a couple days to get onboarded. And even recently, with the approach of Hurricane Isaias along the Florida coast, we had just added a new DJI aircraft into the fleet, and within a matter of a couple hours, that serial number and flight control number was added into QEP, and it was unlocked. So the program works very well. For those of you out there who are wondering about it, Romeo, one more quick question I wanted to get to on the QEP. The question is, the QEP program is great to unlock accounts for COA operations, but we operate under 107. DJI requires a written authorization to apply to the program, but our permissions are real-time using Lance or SOSC. How do we get our drones unlocked? And I think you kind of covered that already, but just to kind of to rehash it really quick.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So Brian, this is not only COA, but also 107. So if your department, some departments, they don't do COAs, they just strictly do 107s for their operators. It doesn't matter if you have either or of those, you could have both. You can go through the same process and you get unlocked, and then you will not be using lands for any future unlocks.
Hey, let me just add something here if I can, Chris. For those of you that aren't operating with COAs, you might really want to consider COAs now with some of the changes with the FAA. A blanket COA gives you immediate ability to fly at night over people, and now it gives you access to the new first responder tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver, which is for dangerous missions. So you really ought to look at it.
Yeah, and another question here in the chat is there a difference between the QEP and DJI custom unlocking? I mean, yes, the QEP program is a program for public safety agencies. Another question in here, and Romeo, I'll throw this one over to you or Chief Baker, but can an individual working for a public safety agency apply for the QEP, or is that limited just to the agencies?
Technically, it's only for the agencies. However, if this is a fully authorized program, then the agency should be able to do the authorization letter, and then we can unlock it as well, as long as the operator has a 107.
And does that QEP unlocking work internationally? There's another question here about that.
That's another very good question. So this particular QEP here for our end users in the United States is for North America. If you are an entity, a public safety entity in Europe, we have an unlock for Europe. It's a separate one. However, if you go on an international rescue operation, let's say Beirut, for example, if somebody were to go to Beirut and utilize the drone there, we would have to do very likely in that area custom unlock. So it's really only for your entire region. But the good news is most of the operations are within North America, and so you are immediately unlocked for all of the United States and Canada. And also another benefit of QEP is that you don't have that altitude limit. That's also in essence canceled.
And I can attest firsthand again, we actually did use a QEP in the Bahamas in the response for Hurricane Dorian last year, and it worked real well there. I mean, we were unsure going in if it was going to happen, but it worked. So North America, yeah, sign up if you are a public safety agency and you operate DJI aircraft. Make sure you enroll in the QEP program. I want to open it up right now and bring in the chiefs, Chief Werner and Chief Baker. And I know, Chief Werner, you've been looking through the Q&A list a little bit. There's some more questions in there, and I'm going to turn it over to you to tackle some of those other questions.
Well, I think we've had some questions about beyond visual line of sight waivers. One question came up as to Chula Vista, how did they get a beyond visual line of sight waiver? And the answer there is they're part of an IPP project with the Federal Aviation Administration. They got the first one, which, however, has led to this new first responder public safety beyond visual line of sight tactical waiver. Again, I can't say enough about that, because if you're an active shooter, hazmat, bomb threat situation, your ability to fly in these situations is dramatically different because, and I'll just hit this really quick, you can fly 50 feet above a building or the highest obstacle, up to 400 feet AGL, and 1,500 feet laterally from your location beyond visual line of sight, which now means you can be in a safe place and operate around a building in these situations. There's been some questions about DJI working with Pix4D React. Some questions about why is it more difficult to do that? So I'll throw that back to Romeo.
Yes, that's a good question, Antonio. I'm just about to also answer you in the chat. So the challenge is the crystal sky. It's one of our, especially for the Matrice 200 series, smart devices in essence, and it wasn't really properly designed to easily add third-party applications on it. It can be done. It's not an easy or a super simple process, but it can be done. So when you are doing a mapping mission, there's a couple of things you could potentially do. In the DJI Pilot, you now have the ability also to do a mission plan, for example, and you create your mapping grid, you execute it, you fly your mission, and then your imagery is on your SD card. You offload the SD cards and drop it into Pix4D React, and it does it. So that's a workaround. If you're working on a Phantom, you don't have pilot there, but I use either DJI Ground Station or even Drone Deploy. It's fantastic and easy to create my map and fly the mission. And once the mission is flown and you have your imagery on your SD card, you can drop it into any stitching solution that you prefer. So there's some workarounds.
And Romeo, we've got another interesting question in here that makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. Does the QEP program unlock shared controls on the M300 or any other aircraft? Do you need the serial numbers from both of the controllers if you're using that tandem operation?
Very good question. And the answer is no. You just need the flight controller serial number and the DJI account. The unlock is in essence in the brain of the drone. And it doesn't matter if you have one or two controllers, it's embedded there. And so you will be unlocked no matter what.
Awesome. And Chief Werner, are you seeing other questions in there that we haven't gotten to? I know there's a lot in there, and some of these we're going to probably need to follow up with because we won't get through all of them today. But what else are you seeing?
I have one here. Wayne might answer this, and I'll try to answer a little bit. Is insurance required or just recommended? And I think that if you're going to fly, you need to make sure that you have insurance of some sort. And if you're working with a locality or a government entity, typically they're self-insured. But you want to make sure that that is covered and that you've mentioned to your insuring agency within that organization that it's covered, so that they can make sure that if there's another endorsement that needs to be added, they can do that. Wayne, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's going to be agency and jurisdiction dependent on what their requirements are. But absolutely, we, I can speak for Texas. Majority of cities and agencies in Texas utilize Texas Municipal League's self-insurance, but still insurance. And so for any Texas agencies, and I'm sure this is going to be the same for any agency's insurance, as long as you have listed the equipment on your, my mind went blank, but you're listing with them, then you are insured. It's just whatever your deductible is with them. For other agencies, volunteer departments, volunteer rescue services, there are quite a few other options out there for getting insurance. I would highly recommend not only having equipment insurance, but having liability insurance for those agencies as well. And some of those you can pay for per flight. So at least the liability, not necessarily the equipment, I don't think, but I highly recommend it.
And Romeo, the question that comes up, can the geofence be set to take into account topography so as ground level raises, you can stay the same height above ground level?
So that's, we do, most of our platforms, they have a variety of different sensor arrays on it, including sensors on the bottom that track the ground above. And there are some platforms that have featured to kind of, track the topography, but obviously it's a little bit more complex when you go out and do a search and rescue operation, for example, in mountainous environments. Our technology is not quite at that point where it can just autonomously always keep, let's say, that 100 foot above ground level altitude just by itself. So it does still need some input from the operator, or then you adjust your map in a way that you instead of mapping upwards, you're mapping sideways and then move to a next grid in essence.
And then there's a question, is there a mapping solution for the M300?
So the M300, as of right now, it was not intended to be a mapping platform. So the current sensors, the H20T, for example, not really a mapping camera. However, we opened up our payload SDK also to the M300. So we're starting to see very soon third-party cameras come to market, including cameras that will be perfect for mapping. And then you will have that capabilities. In theory, you can already do mapping with the M300 and H20T, but the outcome is not really that great because those sensors were not developed for the kind of maps that you ultimately would like to have.
All right, and we're at about the 2-minute mark left in the webinar, so we're gonna have to cut off the Q&A right there, but I can tell you that we will get your questions answered. We're gonna give this information to the DJI Public Safety team. They'll be able to follow up with you and hopefully get answers to anything. In the meantime, Romeo, Chief Baker, what is the best way for anyone looking for more information? And I don't mean anyone, I mean a public safety agency who really needs to have some questions answered that they can't find online. What's the best way for them to work through that process?
Well, both Chief Baker and I, we want to be as accessible as possible. It's pretty easy to get a hold of us, and we have over the years created a lot of helpful documentation and brochures and guides on how to start a drone program, how to scale it up, what to think about. So there's plenty of information available. Just get in touch with us and we'll definitely get those information over to you.
Awesome. And any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with? I'm actually going to ask this question to all three of our panelists today, but Romeo, why don't we start off with you? Any final thoughts?
You know, we're in a fantastic time right now when it comes to drone technology. Obviously, with everything that has happened around the globe with COVID-19, drones have emerged as an even more important tool. But we have only touched the tip of the iceberg. And that's fantastic because there's so much more that can and will be done. And not just by DJI. It's great to see that we're seeing other solutions come to market as well that are very solid, that have benefits for public safety. Because ultimately, we want to utilize this technology to help. And your feedback, your input, your ideas are really helping us, and both Chief Baker and I, we want to continue that discussion and for us to be able to learn, because as we progress, we're using the drone in new and different ways, in ways that maybe a half a year ago we didn't even think of.
All right, thank you. And Chief Baker, I'm going to bring it over to you. Any closing remarks for us?
Again, thank you for the opportunity. I thank all of the attendees as well. I apologize we haven't gotten to everybody's question, but I did in the chat put mine and Romeo's email address, so don't hesitate to reach out to us. You know, just real quick touch on what Romeo said. This is, you know, sometimes I have to have the reality check that this is still an emerging technology. You know, it's great as we're seeing, again, more solutions out there to go with this technology. Hopefully we see, you know, the lives saved numbers just grow exponentially. So thank you all again.
Thank you, Chief Baker. And now up to Charlottesville, Chief Werner.
Well, I'd like to thank both of you for being here, Romeo and Wayne. As I said early on, Romeo, you have probably had the most significant influence on public safety drones in the world. So thanks for all the work that you've done up until now. You've helped me a lot. You've helped many others in departments. Wayne, thanks for the work that you've done in your locality and bringing that expertise and your public safety background to the drone world now. But I will just reinforce what you all said. When you look at it, drones are now very important for safety of both the citizens and responders. It helps to improve operational effectiveness. And third, it gives us that real-time situational awareness, and it often tells us how bad is bad. And there's been a lot of bad. So these tools are really starting to change. I would say we're at a point where public safety agencies really should have drone programs. I've asked a question in a tweet here recently, would a fire commander or a police commander close your eyes and make command decisions? And without the drone, there are things you're not seeing from the ground that you may be doing just that. So with that, Chris, thank you for being the moderator and for a great session today, and all the attendees. Thank you. Drone Responders is free to join. We have one of the largest compilations in our resource center of SOPs, training manuals, and information that may help you get started with the program in addition to what DJI can offer. Thanks.
Thanks, Chief. So just a quick recap, and I think one of the highlights today, we heard from Romeo, 450 lives saved across 259 different incidents, 28 different countries, and that number is growing with the DJI rescue map. And one of the questions out there was, is that rescue map only for DJI drones? Real quickly, Romeo, answer that.
That's a great question too. No, it's all drones. This is not about DJI. This is about drones, the entire drone industry and community. So even if it's a competitor product, we want to have that information on there, because this information helps not only you, your department, but also our citizens to see the value proposition of this technology.
Right. My thanks to all of the guests and all of you for joining us today for another Drone Responders webinar. You can get more information online, both at DJI.com as well as DRONERESPONDERS.org. And if you're into virtual content, we'll have more coming for you next week from the FAA Symposium. Look for both Chief Werner and myself. And in 2 weeks, Chief Werner, Romeo, and Chief Baker will be at DJI Airworks. So you'll continue to see the best public safety content out there coming to you from DJI, Drone Responders, and our other partners. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again real soon. Have a good day.